sharing of personal information with foreign entities. I will just a reminder that that the connections tests, just for the sake of committee, have been completed with our witness, who I know is coming to us from Washington, D.C. today. So let's start the meeting. And first of all, I apologize for the late delay, but I do have my own 30-minute declaration on decorum at committee that I'd like to read right now. I also want to recognize as well that we've got parliamentary officers. The study program are here today. This is why we've got a large crowd in the back, so I want to say welcome to committee as well. So our first, we've got our witnesses till 6:30. From TikTok, we've got Mr. Steve Daer, Director of Public Policy and Government Affairs Canada, and Mr. David, I should have checked this, Lieber, okay, Head of Privacy Public Policy for the Americas. I want to thank you gentlemen both for being here today. We're going to start with you, Steve. You have 5 minutes to address the committee. Go ahead, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of committee. As you said, my name is Steve Daer. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Government Affairs for TikTok Canada, and I'm joined by my colleague, David Lieber, who's our Head of Privacy Public Policy for the Americas, who's on Zoom from Washington. Well, I do work for TikTok. First and foremost, I'm a father of 2 wonderful children, so I care deeply about them being safe and secure online, and I know all parents do. So I'm really happy to have this opportunity to be here today to discuss how we're protecting the data of all Canadians, and particularly teenagers. Millions of Canadians and over 1 billion people around the world come to TikTok to be entertained, to learn, and to build community. TikTok is where an incredibly diverse range of Canadian creators and artists are finding unprecedented success with global audiences, where Indigenous creators are telling their own stories in their own voices, and where small business owners are finding new customers, not just across Canada, but around the world. For example, just last week, I was able to listen to Jen Harper. She's the CEO of Cheekbone Beauty, which is an Indigenous-owned, B Corp certified beauty brand, who spoke at the Toronto Global Forum about the role that TikTok has played in helping her to grow a global customer base and build a community that's invested in learning more about sustainability and Indigenous peoples. We know that with this rapid growth brings scrutiny, and we welcome conversations around how we protect Canadians' data. Let me start by addressing a few misconceptions about TikTok. First, TikTok is a subsidiary of its parent company, ByteDance. ByteDance is not owned or controlled by the Chinese government. It's a private company. Nearly 60% of ByteDance is owned by global institutional investors, such as General Atlantic and Susquehanna International Group. 20% is owned by its founders, and the other 20% is owned by employees like me. Of ByteDance's 5 board members, 3 of them are Americans. TikTok has thousands of employees around the world, with head offices in Los Angeles and Singapore. We have a Canadian office in Toronto's Liberty Village, with over 150 employees who work closely with Canadian creators, artists, and businesses to help them achieve success on the platform. The second misconception I'd like to clarify is around data collection. TikTok's handling of Canadians' user data is governed by Canadian law, like PIPEDA and provincial privacy laws. The way that TikTok collects and uses data is similar to other platforms. In fact, when someone signs up for TikTok, all they're required to share is their email or phone number, their date of birth, and their country location, which are used to verify that they're eligible to create an account and to create an age-appropriate experience. We do not require users to provide things like their real names or to enter personal details about themselves. We take security concerns about our platform very seriously and are working globally to be responsive and put forth constructive, industry-leading solutions to address any concerns. If the Canadian government has concerns about the safety and security of our platform, we want to understand them so that we can address them. As TikTok has grown, we've tried to learn the lessons of companies that have come before us, especially when it comes to the safety of teenagers. While the vast majority of people on TikTok are over 18, we spend a lot of time on measures to protect teenagers. Many of these are firsts for the social media industry. For example, When a teen under 16 joins TikTok, their account will be set to private by default, and they'll have direct messaging disabled. Teens under 18 are unable to live stream and have a default 60-minute time limit turned on. We also provide 60-minute screen time limit. We also provide a suite of family pairing tools so parents and guardians can participate in their teens' experience and make choices that are right for their families. We're proud to partner with leading Canadian nonprofits like MediaSmarts, Kids Help Phone, Tel Jeune, and Digital Moment to support their work to educate Canadians and create resources on issues like online safety, well-being, and digital literacy. We're proud to also have built a constructive relationship across the federal government over the past few years, and to have partnered to support key public policy initiatives. For example, during the 2021 federal election, we worked with Elections Canada to build a bilingual, in-app election center that provided authoritative information to Canadians on when, where, and how to vote. We were also proud that year to sign on to the government's Declaration on Election Integrity Online. TikTok is committed to the safety and security of our community and to maintaining the integrity of our platform. I look forward to sharing more with you about how we accomplish this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dare. I'm just going to remind committee members before we start the round of questioning, we're kind of old school around here, so if you have a question, go direct to the witness, either in person or online, just to be clear and to let Mr. Lieber know that you're asking a question. We're going to start 6 minutes. Mr. Kurek, go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, and thank you to our witnesses for coming. So, Mr. Dare, just curious, you had mentioned in your opening statement that you have kids. Do they have TikTok?
They're too young, actually.
Okay.
In Canada, you have to be 13 to use TikTok, and it's actually 14 in Quebec. So they don't use it, but I will scroll it with them sometimes, and we'll find videos that we want to watch together, but they're too young to have their own accounts.
Okay, no, I appreciate that. Now I'm curious as to Mr. Lieber, if he has kids, and if so, if they're on TikTok.
Thank you for the question. Yes, I do have two children, one who is 11, who is too young for TikTok, but the other is 15, and he is on TikTok.
Appreciate that. And speaking of age verification, because unlike some social media platforms that have age verification, there seems to be ways around some of these things. But specifically with TikTok, Mr. Dare, you're just asked to put your age in, and there's really no questions asked. You talked about that, and it's simple. But has it ever been highlighted, the concerns about how simple that is, that a young person may be able to access content that would not be age appropriate as a result?
I'm happy to take that question. Yeah, we do have a neutral age gating function for users. We don't clue them in about what the eligibility age is, so that we don't indicate to them that providing an age that's either under 13 or over 13 is what they need to do. But I think you're raising a valid point. Age assurance strategies is something that the industry is talking about. We're talking about things like age detection technology and age verification. Those can be helpful in providing more accuracy about users' ages, but they also have privacy implications. And so there's a broader conversation about the types of age assurance strategies that we can deploy as an industry to increase the likelihood and confidence that we know what age users are when they disclose that to us when they create an account.
Okay, thank you for that. Now, I do apologize. It's a little bit rapid fire, but this is, we have limited time here. Governments south of the border in the United States and here as well, and as I understand, a number of provincial governments have limited TikTok's use on government devices, citing security concerns, privacy concerns. And some of that comes back to ownership, where the data is stored. So a few questions here that I'm hoping you can provide some answers for. ByteDance's HQ, I understand, is located in Beijing, but the company is registered in the Cayman Islands. Can you just provide, in just as short a time as possible, an explanation as to why that would be the case?
Sure. So ByteDance is actually a global company. Okay. It was founded in China, but has offices around the world. As I mentioned in my opening statement, the board, which it is ultimately responsible for, 3 of those 5 members are Americans.
Thank you for that. Now, one of the challenges is with data, and this is not unique to TikTok, but certainly it's been highlighted with TikTok, is where data is stored. Now, you're a global company. So can you highlight, and I'm not asking for an address, but servers, where are they located? Where does this data flow through? And specifically as Canadians, where does a Canadian on TikTok, where does that data end up? Where is it accessed, both when they're in Canada and if they happen to travel to other jurisdictions? Mr. Lieber?
Yeah, so Canadian data is stored in the United States, in Singapore, and in Malaysia. Those are where the servers are located.
So in terms of access, who has access to those servers, certainly that's one of the, and to ensure that they are compliant with Canadian privacy laws is obviously a big part of it. So just wondering about if you can highlight how a Canadian can be certain that Canadian privacy laws and that their information is protected online when servers are stored around the world and in jurisdictions that have very different privacy laws.
Yeah, thank you for the question. I think as my colleague Steve noted, in his opening statement, we do have a Canadian operating entity. We have Canadian users, and so we are subject to Canadian law. But I want to emphasize, too, that we have data access approval policies. So that if any employee wants to access user data, they need to make a request. And we operate by the principle of least privilege, which means that employees only have access to the minimum amount of data necessary to perform their job function. And in some cases, that may mean that they don't have access to personally identifiable information at all. And we also have data classification policies with increasing levels of sensitivity of data. And user data is the most sensitive. So if an employee makes a request for user data, that will require increasing and higher levels of approval and more rigorous review. And so we think a combination of these protocols addresses some of the risks and concerns that I think you're alluding to.
Okay, and a couple quick questions, and I'm hoping they can be yes or no. Does TikTok use biometric data at all, whether that's for logging in purposes and whatnot on a device, or tracking an individual's facial structures and that sort of thing?
We do not use biometric data to identify individuals. The data that you may be alluding to, we have filters and effects. So in order to identify where eyes may be located on a face to put, for example, funny glasses on, or for voice effects, but that data is not personally identifiable.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Kurek. We're going to go next to Ms. Khalid. You have 6 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witnesses for appearing today. First and foremost, I'll just say, Mr. Dare, in your opening remarks, you talked about who has access to TikTok, and I will say for the record that TikTok allowed 1.4 million children under the age of 13 to use the app in 2020, despite your own rules that you identified. I want to talk about a specific thing that you mentioned in your statement. You talked about providing an age-appropriate experience to people. What does that mean, and how do you identify what an age-appropriate experience is if you're not collecting data on people and what their interests are? And as you're going through that, I'd love to know more about your algorithms. How is the content that you're displaying to people there for each individual to have an age-appropriate experience or to have an entertainment experience as you identified in your opening remarks?
Great. I'd be happy to start on those few questions there, I think, but I appreciate it and the opportunity to be here. Just first, I'm not familiar with the figure that you cited. What I can tell you is we issued our most recent community guidelines enforcement report. It's like a transparency report that we issue quarterly. We issued the report for the second quarter of 2023. It just came out last week. In that report, we identified that we removed over 18 million accounts globally of users who were suspected of being under 13. I think my colleague David identified to Mr. Kurek some of the tools, some of the challenges, but some of the ways that we work to identify users who may not be old enough to use the platform. And when we do find those accounts, they are removed. Your second question about an age-appropriate experience is an excellent question. We work with nonprofits around the world. In Canada, those are groups like Media Smarts, Digital Moment, Kids Help Phone, who are doing leading research on what type of on the experience of youth online and how we should approach that. And we take that feedback and we've built policies. So we have introduced in the past few years things like age-appropriate content labeling. So there are types of videos that will be labeled that will not be recommended to a user that's under 18. So for example, cosmetic surgery. If somebody posts a video about cosmetic surgery, that's ineligible to be recommended to users under the age of 18. Does that answer your question?
I obviously would like for you to follow up perhaps
Sure.
with a little bit more data on how those algorithms are actually operating in terms of providing
Great.
appropriate experience to people. And my question specifically is like how do algorithms work? When you're saying that you're not collecting biometric data, what kind of data are you collecting to be able to determine what is an appropriate, like reel or
Yeah.
video or a TikTok video to a certain person?
I'm happy to respond to that as well. So essentially how the TikTok algorithm works is it looks at signals on how you interact with videos. There are positive signals. Do you like it? Comment on it, share it. Do you watch the whole video? Do you watch it again? There are negative signals. Do you swipe away from it within a couple seconds? Based on that, we can identify what type of videos you like and look at similars who have other users who have interacted similarly with that video and then recommend additional content to you. And that really allows Canadians to find content and to be recommended content that they think they're going to love. And that's what I hear all the time when I talk to people about TikTok, how they've learned new things and found these niches that are really special to them. If I can just give an example, there's actually a creator in your riding in Mississauga. Her name's Danielle Johnson. She has a company called Realm Candles. I got to meet her earlier this year at one of our events. And it is, she specializes in vegan, eco-friendly candles that she's had a great success on.
I'm so sorry. Because I am quite limited on time,
Sure.
that's really not what I had asked. My question is really around the framework of how algorithms work. The data that you're collecting, how does that impact who sees what in their TikToks? And as a spin-off, I mean, you had mentioned that the data for Canadians is stored in the U.S. It is stored in, I believe you said Malaysia or Singapore, my apologies. And I'm just wondering, how does the legal aspect of it work as well? For Canadians, how do they protect their data when we don't have any offices by your company here in Canada that is looking over Canadian data?
Got about 45 seconds. to
So
answer that question.
we do have an office in Toronto, and as we've said, our operations in Canada are subject to Canadian privacy law. And we're happy to engage further. I'm happy to follow up with some more information about how we protect user data, particularly for younger users.
Yeah, if you can follow up on
Sure.
the algorithm piece,
Yeah,
I'd love
of course.
to hear about that also, please.
Yeah, I'd be happy to.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Ms. Khalid. You can submit any information, data to the clerk of the committee as well, Steve, just so you know. OK, en avant de commencer avec M. Villemure pour 6 minutes, Mr. Leiber, I want to make sure you've got your translation on. You're good to go. M. Villemure, 6 minutes, commencez, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you to both of our witnesses for being with us today. Mr. Deere, how many users... The interpreter regrets she did not hear the question.
Combien de pays ont interdit
How many countries have banned TikTok?
Is it OK? Ça commence.
I will restart your time, Mr. Villemure. Thank you very much. How many countries have banned the use of TikTok?
Focus on Canada. I don't know what the exact number is or what you would define as a ban. TikTok is available in most parts of the world.
Monsieur
I
Legault,
will-
peut-être? M. Lieber, peut-être nous répondre combien de pays ont interdit TikTok?
How many countries have banned TikTok, Mr. Lieber?
Mr. Leiber? Mr. Lieber,
Yes,
sorry.
yeah. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that question. I think I'm aware of one, India, that has banned the app, but as you know, there are countries where the app is not available due to policies on government devices, but I'm not sure how many of those countries there are.
L'usage de TikTok?
On February 23rd, India, Indonesia, Pakistan, and Canada have banned the use of TikTok on government devices, and a $2 million sanction imposed by Ireland. Why is that?
Tu peux proposer ton question à...
Can you direct your question to a specific witness, please? It's easier for the witnesses to know who you're speaking to.
In terms of the government device ban, there have been a few countries that have put forward those policies, including Canada. We've engaged with the Treasury Board Secretariat, with the CIO's office, to try and understand better what criteria was used to identify only TikTok and to single out TikTok, whether that same criteria has been applied to other platforms. We do operate similar to other platforms. I will say our policy, and we've been public about this, is that there probably isn't a need to have any social media apps or entertainment apps or gaming apps on a government employee device. But those rules should apply equally to all platforms. And we've actually seen some harmful effects come out of this ban because there was not enough context and information given. In Quebec, in particular, there are a number of doctors who had grown followings of about 80,000 plus on TikTok, and they used their platform that they had to educate people about medical misinformation around TikTok, around COVID-19, and they would do those duet videos where you have...
L'Union européenne a imposé.
The European Union enforced a sanction of $345 million because it was alleged that data was shared with the Chinese government. What do you have to say to that?
I'll let my colleague David answer that one.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that question. I think that was that fine was imposed, and it was in relation to settings for younger users. The investigation that took place covered the period of July to December of 2020. At the time that the investigation was commenced, we had already implemented protocols to make certain teenagers' accounts private by default. Some of the settings that Mr. Dier talked about in his opening statements were deployed for all of our users. So we addressed those concerns. We disagree with the decision and the fine, and we've appealed that fine.
Le Sénat français disait que...
The French Senate was saying that TikTok was giving access to the Chinese Communist Party, access to that data. And there is a report by the European Union. So what do you think about that?
Well, we've been quite clear that we would not disclose user data to the Chinese government if they made a request. They have not made such a request. And the Chinese government has not asserted the rights over any TikTok user data. The TikTok app itself is not available in mainland China. And as we have discussed before, we have a Canadian operating entity in Canada. We have employees in Canada. We have users in Canada, and we're subject to Canadian law. We also have a biannual transparency report where we disclose the number of government requests that we receive from governments throughout the world. And so if we did receive a request from the Chinese government, we would certainly disclose it in our transparency report.
Transparence, justement. Qu'est-ce que la transparence?
With transparency, what does transparency mean with regards to consent for TikTok?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Les gens qui...
People who create a TikTok account, do they understand how their data can be shared? Yes or no?
Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate that. Yes, we do have a privacy policy. We publish information about the data that we collect, how we use it, the extent to which it may be disclosed and under what conditions. We provide, extensive settings that users can utilize to the extent that they want to limit information sharing.
N'ayant que 30 secondes, je vous laisse vous interrompre.
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt you. Do you believe that users understand the use of their data?
We are constantly endeavoring to improve their understanding of how we collect and use data. It's one of the reasons that we provide the settings that we do so that they can take advantage of it if they want to further protect their privacy. But in many instances, as Steve mentioned in his opening statement, those privacy protections are available by default. Users who are under 16 have their accounts set to private by default. Direct messaging is disabled. Live streaming is unavailable for users who are under 18, and for users who are under 18, there's a 60-minute daily default limit. Those are all industry-leading protections that we deployed, and some of them we deployed several years ago to address some of these very concerns.
Okay, merci, Monsieur Villemur.
Thank you, Monsieur Villemur. I gave you some extra time because it was important to hear the answer.
Next, Mr. Green. Mr. Green, you have 6
Mr.
minutes.
Chair,
I'm just going to
I
ask.
have a point of order.
Okay, go ahead on your point of order.
Thank you very much. I'm deeply concerned here, Mr. Chair. You'll recall that in the outset of this study, I debated vigorously to ensure that other companies were presented here. I have received communications from a Miss Curran, or Rachel Curran, somebody who should be well known to the work of committees and the importance of committees. And I just want to get clarification from the clerk on which version of the motion was sent to Facebook or its parent company Meta and Ms. Curran in the reference to the use of social media platforms, and that this study not just being a study about TikTok.
Okay, I'm going to refer that
Was it the original version that was sent, Mr. Chair, or was it the amended version that was sent?
According to the clerk, Mr. Green, it was the amended version that was sent.
And so, and just to be clear, as our standing orders present in terms of the parliamentary privileges of committees to seek for documents and call witnesses, I want to begin, Mr. Chair, in this point of order by sharing my deep disappointment that a corporation, particularly one like Facebook, that was involved in Cambridge Analytica, can simply send us a letter and say that they're not going to attend based on their personal opinion on the matter. It's not, just for the record, Mr. Chair, up to their personal opinion. And I want to ask you on this point of order on whether or not this would warrant a follow-up letter from yourself as the chair to demand that they come here, or whether we ought to seek other more direct subpoena-type powers to ensure that corporations besides TikTok that have been involved with some serious security breaches and some serious malicious behavior, as I referenced with Cambridge Analytica, in order that we have a full discussion about the impacts of social media. I'm seeking your direction, sir.
I appreciate that, Matt. And what I'm going to suggest is that we will have time after these witnesses are done. We have a hard stop at 7 o'clock if we want. So we can have time to discuss where we want to go with this. And of course, as the chair, I'll certainly take the direction of the committee, but my suggestion is that we continue, and I appreciate your point of order and your concern about this, but my preference is that we continue with the witnesses because we have them for a short period of time, only till 6:30.
Sure.
And then if you like, you can bring this up afterwards, sir. Okay?
Oh, I most certainly will.
Okay.
And I'll begin my statement, sir, by welcoming the members here from TikTok for having the courtesy and the integrity to show up before this committee. It's a very important discussion. I would suggest that the targeting of one particular company in its geopolitical relationships is troubling for me, and is part of a continuing trend of what I would call red baiting, but we'll allow you to answer in this next series of questions, because in reference to the last interventions regarding the French Senate Commission of Inquiry into the use of TikTok social media network and the use of the data and its strategy to influence, it released the conclusions of its report, and they were just referenced. And I want to make crystal clear while you're here, and certainly we haven't made you, swear in officially an oath, but I'm going to take you at your word that you understand the quasi-judicial nature of this committee and the seriousness of this study, that one of the conclusions included its finding that the Communist Party and the Chinese intelligence agencies could potentially have access to data collected on TikTok on its users around the world, despite constant efforts to conceal this fact. I want you to provide us with a concise and clear response to that allegation, because it seems to be at the crux of the matter here.
So thank you for that question. And I would emphasize that is a theoretical concern that's been raised. And we've been pretty clear, categorically so, that we would not disclose user data to the Chinese government if we were requested to do so.
That's a request, sir. What if they didn't ask you? Do they have the ability through their technologies or through any other back doors to this, that through any of your partners or any relationships to any operations on mainland or in Hong Kong or anywhere else, that might provide them, without the need to request, any access to user data?
Well, I'm not aware of any such capability, but I also want to be clear that it would be irresponsible for me or any other employee of a technology company to make categorical guarantees about what governments are capable of or incapable of in terms of their ability to conduct activities, including hacking on their own initiative.
So I wasn't speaking about hacking. I was just talking about without requesting, if they could just access it. So I appreciate the response on that. And obviously that is the crux of the matter. As somebody who has pushed for a wider study on the use of social media, whether it's through private actors like Elon Musk and the kind of unhinged nature in which his takeover of Twitter has resulted into the evolution of that, or the devolution of that platform, or Facebook or Instagram or others, I think it's important that we get clear about what it is that's at stake here. And so one of the other findings from the 4 headings under the French Senate report included that the extensive data collection carried out by the platform for the purposes remain opaque. The multifaceted opacity on the part of the company included its lack of transparency and the opacity of TikTok's recommended algorithm, and the public health issue with regard to concerns about the psychological effects of TikTok, particularly amongst young people. Do you accept the findings of the report?
Yeah, I would disagree with the characterization about extensive data collection. We collect less data in many instances than our competitors. If you sign up for a TikTok account, the only thing you need to provide is an email address or phone number, date of birth, and a username. You can create an account in that fashion. We don't ask for people's...
Sir, let's be clear. Like, we know that that's how you sign up. We know once the app is installed. Is it not the case that you're tracking things whether the app is running or not?
Well, what I can tell you is that when people are using our app, we're collecting information.
That wasn't the question I asked you, sir.
We're not collecting.
When you're not using the app, does it continue to collect information on what you're searching, keystrokes, views, and all of those things?
No.
Okay, so for the past several years, the Committee on the Foreign Investment in the United States has attempted to negotiate a national security contract with TikTok meant to mitigate concerns that it would be used by the Chinese government to access valuable personal information about U.S. citizens or manipulate U.S. civic discourse. Can you comment on the status of these negotiations, please?
Yeah, the status of those negotiations are ongoing.
And so is that all you're going to comment on?
I'm happy to talk further about the protocols that we've deployed to address those concerns, if that's useful. We do have a project, it's called Project Texas, and it endeavors to address the concerns that the U.S. government has raised, mainly the concern about Chinese government access to user data, and also the concern that the platform may be, manipulated or used, as a conduit for China.
Can you appreciate for a moment the concern that I have about the contradiction between your opening remarks about the ability for the Chinese government, your very clear refusal in terms of its access to your data, and the fact that the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States is in the process of an ongoing negotiation for a national security contract?
Well,
clearly the U.S. thinks that this is a problem. Is that fair to say?
Well, we're eager to address those concerns, and we think that the protocols that we've developed respond directly to the theoretical concerns that the U.S. government has raised.
So in the follow-up to the questions about the Ireland's Data Protection Commissioner and the fine that was received of £345 million, you addressed some of the things that you have changed regarding that. But I would like to ask you, are these policies in place for all users or only the ones based in the EU?
The policies vis-a-vis teenagers are in place for all of our users.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green. That completes our first round. On va commencer maintenant avec le deuxième.
We're going to start with our second round, and for 5 minutes, Mr. Gould, you have the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you to the witnesses for being with us. My questions will be for both witnesses, depending on who is able to answer. My question has to do with content and consent. Often TikTok is used to promote products by entrepreneurs, but other people are on TikTok involuntarily because people use other people's videos, might change them without their consent. I was a TikTok victim, in fact. They've lengthened my ears and it can be used to make you say things that you haven't said. But if I wanted to have that video removed, would I be able to have access to services in French, for example? And would it be somebody in Canada who would respond, or would it be someone from another country who might not understand the depth of my problem?
Thank you for the question. There's a few things in there I'd love to answer. So we do have a number of policies. We have our community guidelines. Those are public. They're on our website, and they outline what is and isn't allowed on TikTok. And that's what guides our content moderation. We have a team of over 40,000 safety professionals globally that work every day to moderate content and remove content that violates those guidelines. So, for example, if something were to meet our guidelines for bullying, if something were to meet our community guidelines that's violative for impersonation, particularly of public officials, or copyright as well. We have intellectual property guidelines. Those could all be instances where that material would be removed. I can't speak to a specific instance. I don't work on the trust and safety team. That is separate than our public policy team that I'm on. But I'm happy to follow up with those guidelines, or if there's a specific instance that you want us to look into. In terms of the language, the TikTok app is the user interface is available in a number of languages, including not just French, but we have a Canadian French setting. And so any user can select that, and the entire app and interface will be in Canadian French. The moderators that we have, as I said, are around the world. We do have content moderators in Canada. We have a team across North America and around the world that work 24/7, 365 days a year to ensure the security of our platform.
So, in the context of minors, often in high schools, they're kids of 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. They video other children, and people end up on TikTok without their knowledge. In your guidelines that you mentioned earlier, when it's a person that didn't give their consent, and they end up on TikTok, imagine they must feel ridiculized. It's discriminatory, and it could impact a young person. Do you have any measures in place if there's irreparable damage done?
Again, if that were to be the situation where there was ridiculing or discrimination against an individual, whoever it is in the video, that would violate our community guidelines. Any user could report that video, and we would review it, and we would remove it.
Do you have any statistics that you can share with the committee and show the goodwill of TikTok in protecting people's privacy? Could you send that to the committee? Doesn't have to be today, but in future?
Of course, I'd be happy to share a number of items, including our community guidelines enforcement report that I mentioned earlier. I do have some of the data, if you'll allow me. In the second quarter of 2023, 885 videos that were uploaded in Canada were removed for being violative of our guidelines. It sounds like a lot of videos. It's actually less than 1% of the entire volume, and that's a consistent average we see globally. 90% of those videos we removed proactively. That means we didn't wait to get a report. We do rely on user reports. They're very valuable, but we were able to identify 90% of those violative videos and remove them before our report even came in. But I'd be happy to follow up with the entire report. It's a very rich data report. You can download it as a CSV, and happy to make sure you have that information.
Okay. Merci, Monsieur Gould. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gould.
We are going to go to Mr. Baines now for 5 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'll be sharing some time with my colleague, Ms. Damoff. To you, Mr. Diar, my first question is, in his statements before Congress, the CEO of TikTok, Mr. Shu Chu, said that we do not collect precise GPS data at this point. However, according to TikTok's privacy statement, and I quote, advertisers, measurement, and other partners share information with us about you and the actions you have taken outside the platform, such as your activities on other websites and apps or in stores, including the products or services you purchased online or in person. These partners also share information with us, such as mobile identifiers for advertising. So can you inform the committee what the difference is between collecting precise GPS data and receiving, quote, unquote, mobile identifiers from third parties?
I'm happy to answer that question. It is true that we do not collect the precise location information about our users. We do collect approximate location, often based on a user's IP address. So what we can do is identify that someone may be in a particular province or city, but we wouldn't be able to identify with any precision where an individual was located. We wouldn't be able to, for example, deliver a pizza to somebody's house based on the location information that we have. The part of our privacy policy that I believe you're alluding to discusses how data may be shared from advertising partners that we work with. So sometimes advertisers launch campaigns with TikTok and they want to understand, for example, when a user has clicked on an advertisement, if they put something into a shopping cart, if they've downloaded an app, and oftentimes mobile identifiers are the ways that we can match up activity between between a TikTok user and an action they may have taken on an advertiser's website.
And then so all these the third parties do have access to these identifiers, and they are shared, though.
Well, they have access just for the purpose of understanding, for example, how their advertising campaigns worked, whether they were successful, how many app downloads or installs occurred, how many people looked at an ad, how many people may have purchased a good. That's the type of data that they're often interested in. It's more in an aggregated fashion.
Okay, I'm just going to follow up with a different question there. According to Reuters, ByteDance Technology sold a 1% stake in a deal to Wangtu Zhongwen's Beijing Technology, which is owned by 3 state entities, according to Tianyancha, an online database of China's corporate records. The deal also allowed the Chinese government to appoint a board director at Beijing ByteDance. Why would a 1% stakeholder merit a seat on the board? That's to you, Mr. Diar.
Sure. Happy to respond to that and to clarify that. There's been some misinformation around that. So you are correct. There is a Chinese operating entity that's specifically for the Chinese market where that was the case, and that's my understanding is a local law. That entity has nothing to do with TikTok, no oversight over TikTok. Those employees cannot access TikTok user data, and it is not above TikTok in the org chart. My understanding is that is required, and it's for things like content licensing and media licensing.
Ms. Damoff, you have 1 minute exactly.
I'm timing myself.
Okay.
Thank you for being here. I know cheekbone. I'm wearing it right now, actually. When you talk about the information that you're able to obtain from people, it reminds me when we were studying the national security framework and somebody said, oh, it's just a return address on an envelope. If a young teenager is doing certain searches, maybe they have self-esteem issues or they're overweight, you can tell all of that from what they're doing online. And then things get targeted to them, right? I know you're on the board of Media Smarts, so you must care about this stuff a lot. But what are you doing in your company to make sure that young people are being protected online? Because it's a lot more than just an email address. And a 15-year-old that is having self-esteem issues, sorry, Chair, I'll let you go. You've only got a few seconds.
No, you got 10 seconds.
Maybe I can follow up with some more information on that. But we thank you for pointing out Media Smarts. We're very proud to be partners with them, and I'm proud of the work I get to do with them personally. We have a number of settings that we put in place: education campaigns, advocacy campaigns. We also provide links. If you search for a certain topic that might be related to mental health or well-being, a button will come up in the search results and will direct you to resources like Kids Help Phone or Teljeune or others that may be able to provide that help.
So, you know, you had 30 seconds there, but it was an important response. And one of the tough parts about this job that I don't like is that I have to cut people off. Monsieur Villemure, 2 minutes et demi, s'il vous plaît.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I only have 2.5 minutes, so I'll be quick. Mr. Deere, do you agree that using social media like TikTok is a form of addiction?
Thanks for the question. I think that there's a lot of research out there on the appropriate amount of time for social media use, and particularly for young people, that is something that they should be discussing with their parents or their guardians, and it may be different for every family. We take screen time use very seriously. As I mentioned, we have a default 60-minute screen time limit that applies to all users under 18. If you spend time on TikTok after a certain hour, every once in a while a video will come up suggesting that you take a break. Sorry.
The interpreter regrets, but the microphone wasn't on. So if you were over 18, addiction could still be real.
We think this is an issue that yes, it's something that all people, regardless of their age, should talk about. It's not something that's unique to TikTok. It's an industry challenge, and I think there's a role for both industry as well as government and civil society and nonprofits to figure out how to address this. This is something that Canadians do care about, and we care about it, and we're trying to work here to find ways to ensure that people who love our product, who love using TikTok, can do it in a healthy way.
Voyez-vous que l'utilisation de médias sociaux tels TikTok
So not only TikTok, but other social media, is that a way of manipulating someone's interests?
crée une forme de manipulation?
No, I would disagree with that characterization. We recommend videos to users based on what we think they're going to like, and to identify videos that we think they would like. We've talked about, David mentioned, the town that you're in. Local content and locality of content is something that's important for TikTok and somewhat unique to TikTok. So if you're in Quebec, you will get more Quebec-based creators that will be recommended to you, and they're able to be discovered. There's actually a great small business in Trois-Rivières called, I want to make sure I get this right, Bonbon Mélange, and it is an ice cream and a candy shop. It only opened in May, and their business has exploded because of the interest that people are driving from all over the province to go there to meet the owner, Annie, because what they see on TikTok.
C'est néanmoins l'algorithme qui croit que l'on aime quelque chose.
The interpreter regrets she missed the beginning of the question again.
Oh, je m'excuse. Posez la question encore.
Please repeat your question. You stated that the algorithm thinks that you might like something, so a decision is made outside of the user.
So the decisions are made and presented to a user, and then we can see how, depending on how they interact with it. So it'll present a broad range of choices to you, and if you watch a whole video, if you like it, if you interact positively with it, it will recommend more videos, not exclusively, but that'll give it a signal of the type of content that you like. I love, for example, I get a lot of parenting humor. I get a lot of
Sorry, Mr. Dare. We went over on that one. Sounds like a road trip to Trois-Rivières is coming up for some ice cream too. Mr. Green, I'm going to give you 3 minutes because of Mr. Villemure's 3 minutes. So go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, because it's going to give me the opportunity to return to a very important question. Mr. Lieber, I want you to think carefully about the next question I'm about you to ask before you answer it. And I want to begin by referencing the Home Ice Advantage, which is securing data sovereignty for Canadians on social media, dated November of 2020. And in it, it states that TikTok's privacy policy states that they store and transfer user data in Singapore or in the United States outside the country where the users live. However, prior to 2019, TikTok's privacy policy stated, we will also share your information with any member or affiliate of our group in China for the purposes set out above. This provision has since been updated with, we may share your information with a parent, subsidiary, or other affiliate of our corporate group. So based on the questions that I asked you, that is a market, I would say, a departure from the characterization and framing you had about where information is shared and how. So I would like for you now to comment on whether or not you may share information with your parent companies or subsidiaries in China.
Yeah, thank you for that question. I believe the question you asked before was about storage, and we do have a provision in our privacy policy that talks about sharing within our corporate group, and there are functions that are performed by other aspects of our corporate family. It may be something like troubleshooting an account. Or
Sir, I wasn't talking about storage. That wasn't the context. The answer will reflect that. I was talking about sharing information with the Chinese government. You stated that that is not the case. It's not about storage. Do you have a parent company in China that has access to user data? Yes or no?
Yes, there are instances where
and is that Chinese company, your parent company, is it also regulated under Chinese state national law that should the Chinese government want to access their information, third party to you, that they could do that, sir? Yes or no?
Well, I'm not an expert in Chinese law, but what I can speak to.
But you should be if you're a subsidiary of a company related to China, sir.
Well, the Chinese government has not asserted any rights over TikTok's user data.
That's not what I asked. I want you to state whether or not your parent company is subject to the Chinese Communist Party's laws. Yes or no?
Well, the parent company has subsidiaries that are in all parts of the world, and those parts of the world where there aren't Chinese users may have jurisdictional arguments that the Chinese law doesn't apply, but I'm not going to opine on the application of Chinese law to each and every one of those subsidiaries.
Do you share information with your parent company? Do you sell information? Do you sell it to third parties? Yes or no?
We do not sell information.
Do you share information?
With third parties, as described in our privacy policy, yes.
Okay, thank you,
Can you
Mr. Green.
clarify the difference between selling data and sharing it with third-party partners?
Sorry, that's 3 minutes. So if we're going to stay on time, I apologize about that. We're going to stay on time. We're going to go to Mr. Barrett for 5, and then we have got one more 5 with Madame Fortier. Go ahead, Mr. Barrett, 5 minutes.
Thanks, Chair. Thank you to both the witnesses for being here today. I have a couple of very important questions to get through, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention why these questions are so important. And these questions are important because I know that that local content creators, you were talking about local content before, that your platform presents opportunities. And so what we need to know is what the risks are to people in our community who are using this platform. There's a great local story in my riding, McMullen Appliance, Corey and Kyle, they're TikTok famous with their appliance shop, this little appliance shop just outside of Smiths Falls, Ontario, and they do tremendous business and sales as a result of a very entertaining TikTok account. And so what we need to know is, of course, the risks that folks are exposed to as a result of using this. So I wish them continued success, of course, in that. So for either of the witnesses, can you tell me about any connection between TikTok and the United Front Work Department? And I'm happy to explain what the United Front Work Department is in further detail, other than them being a propaganda arm of the Chinese Communist Party, if more information is needed. So Mr. Lieber or Mr. Dare, any?
Just first, thank you for mentioning Corey. I know you've spoken about McMullen Appliance in the House, and they're one of my favorite accounts. They've done an amazing job and shows the global reach of TikTok. In terms of your question, and I'm not familiar with that organization, but I can speak to the Chinese government or the CCP writ large. TikTok is not available in mainland China. TikTok is not a state-owned enterprise. We are a private organization. ByteDance is a private company. Their board, the company is ultimately accountable to the board. 3 of those 5 members of the board are Americans.
Okay. And so I appreciate you provided some of that information before, Mr. Dare. Can you tell me about a connection between Douyin and TikTok?
My understanding of Douyin, I've never used it, but it is a similar product that ByteDance has that is specifically for the Chinese market, because TikTok is only available outside of China.
So both owned by ByteDance.
Yes.
So we have a social media app for China, for mainland China, and we have a social media app for everywhere else. The everywhere else app is TikTok, and the mainland China app is Douyin. So that's a fair assessment. These are sister companies.
Yeah, that's a general assessment, yeah.
So there have been media reports that outline what Douyin is used for in mainland China, and it's used as a propaganda tool of the Chinese Communist Party. And they pump hundreds of thousands of dollars into their influencer network so that they can affect the propaganda that the Communist Chinese Party is looking to disseminate through the United Front Work Department. And so the proximity between these sister companies is the type of thing that gives rise to great concern for us as legislators, for Canadians as users, for us as parents. What assurances do we have that the techniques that have been documented that are being carried out by the Chinese Communist Party and the United Front Work Department using Douyin, the sister app to TikTok, that similar efforts aren't being employed by the dictatorship in Beijing to interfere in our democratic institutions here in Canada, or to affect other nefarious purposes that haven't been detected?
Thank you for the question. It's a great question, and again, I appreciate that you're asking this in terms of ensuring the safety and security of Canadians and your constituents. I just will preface that I work for TikTok. I am not involved or familiar. I've never used Douyin. It is a separate app. TikTok operates for markets outside of mainland China. Our CEO is a Singaporean. He's based in Singapore. Our head of our general counsel is an American based in the U.S. Our global head of trust and safety is based in Dublin. He is the ultimate authority. If you're concerned about things like propaganda, videos being recommended, he is the ultimate authority on our community guidelines and what videos come down. And those decisions on content moderation are based on our community guidelines. We strive to be very transparent. I'll just wrap up very quickly. We have our community guidelines enforcement report. I will share that with you. We do outline in that covert influence operations that we've identified and disrupted and removed from our platform. And I think that speaks to the seriousness that we take this with.
Thank you
for your response,
Steve. Thank you for that. Sounds like we may expand our witness list here. Madame Fortier, please go ahead for 5 minutes, final round.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et je vais partager mon temps.
Thank you, and I'll be sharing my time with MP Damoff. Thank you for being with us today. As you know, we talked about TikTok, and they've been sanctioned multiple times because of infringements of protecting privacy of minors and children. So 345 million euros for users under the age of 16. Accounts that were public. And in the UK, £12.5 million for the misuse of children's data. How can we trust TikTok and its operations in Canada when we see that there wasn't enough diligence for the safety of children outside of Canada?
Monsieur Dare ou
Mr. Dare or Mr. Lieber?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that question. I had mentioned earlier that the investigation that took place with the Irish Data Protection Commission centered around settings that were public and that we had changed before the investigation was commenced. We think we've addressed those issues. But I take your point. This is an issue that we approach with determination, but also with some humility. We want to understand.
Peut-être plus directement, si vous me permettez.
But perhaps, and I don't have a lot of time, what measures are you taking to ensure that you are protecting the safety of minors and children?
They are the measures that we've discussed. We make the accounts of users who are under 16 private by default. We disable direct messaging for that universe of users. We impose a 60-minute time limit on the use of TikTok. That's a daily time limit. And we limit live streaming to only those users who are over age 18. So those are protections that are industry leading that we've led on. And we think protect the privacy and safety of our teenage users.
Maintenant, ma prochaine question, c'est en fonction du consentement. Je sais qu'on a effleuré.
My next question has to do with consent. I know we mentioned it briefly, but I want to talk about minors and whether or not they truly consent. How can you be sure of that, especially for data collection on your platform?
Well, there are certain data elements that if any company requests from users that they will need to obtain consent from. That's more sensitive information like contact lists, like precise location information, which we do not ask for, unlike most of our competitors. So we've made decisions about the data that we collect in a pretty deliberate way, and we've chosen not to collect data that would be very useful for the company, I think, in order to protect the privacy not only of our teenage users, but of our larger user base writ large.
Okay, merci, Pam.
How much time do I have left?
I want to go back to the line of questioning I was using before about young people, because I don't think adults understand how much data they're sharing with social media companies. It's not just you. Certainly, teenagers have no concept of what kind of data you're able to collect and the influence that you can have on their interests and the type of things that they see. I worry particularly about those that are impressionable and vulnerable and the type of information that they receive. So can you maybe go into a little bit more information on how you're trying to educate teenagers about what they're sharing and what influence that has?
I'd be happy to. As I think I mentioned in my opening statement, I'm a father. We actually live in Oakville, North Burlington. And so this is something that's really important to me as my kids are coming of age and starting to explore online. So there are, I think we've outlined a few times, the settings that we have in place. One thing we may not have mentioned is that if you're under 16, your videos will not be eligible for recommendation into the For You feed. So those will not come up for other users as they come out. We also work extensively with the nonprofits that I've mentioned. They're doing some great work. Canada has some of the best nonprofits in the world on these issues. We've hosted sessions with Digital Moment, for example. They're based out of Montreal. We had a youth session at our office in Toronto where they brought in a number of youth from the area to talk about algorithms and understand how algorithms work and what algorithm bias is. We think that this is an industry issue. It's not unique to TikTok, but we know we are a popular platform and that we have responsibility and a role to play here. It's also something, in going to Madame Fortier's question about consent. We know this is something for young people that's in Bill C-27. That's something that we're looking forward to being engaged on, especially as it's in committee now. We think there's definitely a role for government and a need to update Canada's privacy laws.
Thank you, Ms. Danoff. I want to thank both our witnesses for being here today, Mr. Dare and Mr. Lieber. We certainly could have gone on longer. Unfortunately, circumstances dictated that we had to shorten the meeting up. But I want to thank you both for being here as part of this important study of this committee. And Ms. Khalid, I have Mr. Barrett first. I did a couple of hands. Let me dismiss the witnesses and then we can start. Okay.
That's just it.
Oh.
while the witnesses are still here. if
Okay,
that's
while the
Chair.
witnesses are still here.
And through you, Chair, I just wanted to know if it would be appropriate if we as a committee, and I realize that there was not a lot of time on the clock today for us to get all of our questions in. I'm just wondering if our witnesses would be amenable if the committee sent them a list of questions to provide written responses for.
Dear, I suspect that's not a problem for you or Mr. Lieber as well. Okay. So if you do, obviously you're going to go through the clerk and we'll send them on behalf of the committee. So, gentlemen, I want to thank you for being here today. Mr. Lieber from Washington, Mr. Dier, you should be able to catch your flight back to Toronto as promised. I'm going to dismiss the witnesses. I do have a hand in the room, and that would be Mr. Barrett. Go ahead, Mr. Barrett, please.
Thanks very much, Chair. So I just wanted to use the opportunity that we had this afternoon, just following up on a notice of motion that I provided to the committee with respect to Sustainable Development Technologies Canada. And there were new revelations in news media today with respect to the whistleblowers in this case who have now expressed concern for reprisals against them. And the committee currently has this study programmed, and because of the importance of this issue and the runway that's required to get a study off the ground, I would like to move this motion today. We've got a few minutes. Members have had a few days to consider. And so I'd just like to advance this, and then we'll proceed with it. So this has been circulated to all members of the committee, and I'll just read the motion now. I move that pursuant to Standing Order 1083H, and in light of the new information revealed through whistleblower complaints regarding the $1 billion fund awarded by the government to Sustainable Development Technologies Canada to deliver taxpayer money to the green sector, the committee dedicates 6 meetings to this matter and hear testimony from the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, the Minister of Environment, Minister of Finance, and that the committee order the government to produce all documents related to this program, including emails, briefing notes, text messages, contracts, funding agreements, memorandums of understanding, and any other document that the government has related to the program. Chair, this is incredibly important at a time when Canadians are facing a cost of living crisis, that it looks like as a result of conflicts of interest and gross mismanagement at this taxpayer-funded organization, that Canadians are able to get answer about the alleged misappropriation of over $150 million taxpayer dollars. So this is incredibly important. I appreciate that this isn't a study that's going to step off on Monday morning or Wednesday afternoon of next week. But I put the motion on notice in good faith because I wanted members to have the opportunity to consider it. But with the revelations today about the concern of the whistleblowers, the proponents behind this, that the prospect of a parliamentary committee studying this that should, in its infancy, provide some comfort that Canadians are now aware and that reprisals would, of course, be unacceptable, and that the country is watching. And I think that that's incredibly important for our democratic institutions, that people know that when they see something wrong happen, that they know that they can bring it forward without those fear of consequences and reprisals, and that they're not working with their hands tied behind their back because of non-disclosure agreements or threats to their safety or their livelihoods.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barrett. So the motion has been moved. I'm going to deem it in order, but I will caution the committee, whichever way we want to go with this, as you stated, it's not going to start in the next couple of weeks. I want to make that clear because we've committed and are focused on the social media study, and that's the direction that and that's the actual game plan that we've mapped out here between the clerk and the analyst. I see Madame Fortier, but I'm going to go to Mr. Green first because you had your hand up. Go ahead, Mr. Green.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And as you'll recall, I think that this is an important study. I just want to reference, and I'm sure you'll all recall in the Trudeau Foundation study that we made it crystal clear that people who testify, here, that their testimony is protected. And I think that it's important for Canadians watching to know that when people participate in these parliamentary committees, they should be able to do so with candor, and certainly whistleblowers need to be protected. So I wanted to start there. I do think this is something we could probably get done maybe in 2 meetings. I don't know that we need 3, if I'm to understand correctly. Right now, you're looking at 3.
Motion
Is that
says
right?
6, Mr. Green.
6.
Yeah.
Okay, that seems like a lot. I'm going to be honest. I'm not on. I don't think for 6 meetings, but I will certainly cede the floor to other interventions that might be able to convince me otherwise. But at this point, I think that we can bring in the necessary parties and have perhaps the time within 2 or 3 meetings to unpack some of that rather than drag it out over 6. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green, and thank you for the point on parliamentary privilege being extended to members of the public who do appear within the committee structure as well. I think that is an important point. Madame Fortier, go ahead, please.
Thank you, merci. Thank you for bringing that motion forward. I believe that there is some importance to look into it. Perhaps I would suggest, same as my colleague from the NDP, Matt Green, that we don't need 6 meetings to do so, and 2 would probably be the better approach. There's also a lot of effort being done currently, as we know, by the Minister of Innovation, of looking into it. We saw there is a Grant Thornton report that has been tabled. So I would bring forward, Mr. Chair, 3 amendments to the current motion, if I may. And the first one would be, as I mentioned earlier, to replace the word 6 meetings with 2 meetings. Also, to invite the Minister of Industry and Innovation, but we would remove the words the Minister of...
Just can
Am I
we-
too fast?
Yeah, just
Sorry.
if we can go one amendment at a
Okay,
time.
one
because
amendment
the
at a
clerk
time.
has to
And I have 3.
make
so.
note of it. So
Yeah.
the first one is to go from 6 meetings to 2, okay?
Do you want me to explain them all first, or you want
Yeah,
to?
well, I think the way we should do this is maybe debate each amendment.
Getting
and then
coached for the first
Well,
time,
that's
thank
okay.
you.
Debate each amendment, Madame Fortier.
perfect.
As you propose them. And so the first one is from 6 to 2. We've
Yep.
heard Mr. Green speak to that, and I'd like to hear what you have to say about that particular amendment. Go ahead.
Well, again, I think it's important that we look into it, but we don't need 6 meetings. 2 meetings should be enough with some of the witnesses that we could bring forward, where I will be sharing further down that there might be less witnesses, and I'll share that later.
To see whether there's an agreement among the parties to, on this particular amendment?
Well, let's just move to a vote on it, Chair,
Okay.
and then we can move on to Ms. Fortier's next amendment.
So the
If
first
there's no other
amendment,
speakers.
the first amendment on the motion is to reduce this from 6 to 2 meetings. Madam Clerk, if you want to take the roll.
So on the amendment from Ms. Fortier, Mr. Baines?
Yes.
Ms. Damoff?
Yes.
Mr. Kellaway?
Yes.
Madame Fortier?
Oui.
Ms. Khalid?
Yes.
Mr. Barrett?
No. No.
Mr. Gould?
No.
Monsieur Gould? Mr. Currick?
No.
Monsieur Villemur?
Je suis en faveur.
Mr. Green?
I vote in favor.
7 yeas, 3 nays.
Okay, so that amendment does carry. So on the main motion as amended, you have another amendment? Go ahead, please.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président. Alors, dans ce cas-ci,
Yes, in this case, in this motion, we are inviting 3 ministers. I think that there is one that will be able to answer the questions, and so that's why my second amendment would be to remove the Minister of the Environment and the Minister of Finance.
Okay, so the second proposed amendment by Madame Fortier is to remove the Minister of Finance
and environment.
and Environment, but have the Minister of Industry and Innovation
Yes.
appear. Okay. So you've heard the terms of the amendment. Any discussion on this? Mr. Barrett, go ahead, please.
Chair, so like the previous amendment, I'm opposed to this amendment. I think that because of the seriousness of the issue and the scope of the issue, that the ministers listed were carefully selected. I don't always swing for the fences and ask that, for example, the Prime Minister come to committee on every issue, and so these ministers were carefully selected. I think it's important that that the Minister of Innovation, Science and Industry, the Minister of Environment, and the Minister of Finance be invited to come to committee, and their schedules permitting, and I'm sure that they'd have the time if requested, and so I'm opposed to the amendment.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Barrett. Monsieur Villemure, tu as levé la...
You would raise your hand? But is that for something else or on this? I wanted to hear all three amendments.
Discutons.
Okay, let's talk about the second amendment.
Further discussion on this? Do we have agreement among the committee? We don't. So let's go to a vote on the amendment, and that is to remove the Minister of the Environment, Minister of Finance, and to have the Minister of Industry, Innovation, and Science appear before the committee. Madam Clerk, if you want to call the roll.
Mr. Baines?
Yes.
Ms. Damoff?
Yes.
Mr. Kiraway?
Yes.
Madame Fortier?
Oui.
Ms. Khalid? Yes. Mr. Barrett?
No.
Monsieur Gourde?
No.
Mr. Kirk?
No.
Monsieur Villemure? Mr. Green?
In favor.
Yeas 7, nays 3.
Okay, so that amendment carries. We have another amendment to the main motion by Madame Fortier. This is the final one.
The final one
Okay.
coming from me today.
Go ahead, please.
So again, as we see in the current motion that has been tabled, we talk about perusing all documents related to this program, including emails, briefing. And I believe that the third party that has been giving the mandate to audit this issue and has presented a report, Raymond Chabot Grant Thornton, would be a sufficient document to bring to the committee's attention. I don't think we need to do the job for a third party that just audited this report. Therefore, my third amendment, Mr. Chair, would be that after the word produce, we would replace the remaining text with a copy of the report by Raymond Chabot Grant Thornton. That is my third amendment.
Okay. So we've heard the terms of the amendment, and that is, just to recap, after the word produce, to include the report from Raymond Chabot Grant Thornton, correct? Okay. And that is to eliminate all the words after produce and replace it with that. Mr. Kurek, go ahead, please. On the amendment.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. And I think that it's concerning that we would not permit the committee to take a look at what obviously is a very concerning situation in the associated documentation. There is a track record of covering up, hiding, government not producing documents when asked, hiding behind things like cabinet confidence. So, Mr. Chair, I think that it's important that this motion be expansive in allowing this committee to access any and all documentation that is related to this issue to ensure that Canadians can, in fact, get answers. And with respect to the intent of the motion, we understand and we've heard that that an audit and an investigation has taken place. But certainly, there's a basic question of trust here. And certainly I hear from Canadians on a daily basis that there is not trust in the government. And as a result, I think this committee needs to have the ability to ask for those documents and certainly should be entitled to do so. So I think that it is incumbent upon us to keep that in the motion, and I certainly will not be supporting this amendment.
For that, Mr. Kurek. I see Mr. Green's hand is up.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to take a moment and just draw on some experience I had from another committee that had a prolific amount of document requests. And my question through you, Mr. Chair, does anybody around the table have any idea, based on appendixes or anything, about how many documents we're talking about? And the reason why I ask that is because I would like for this committee, I would assume that this committee would like to see the documents before we commence the study. I think that would be an obvious first step, is that we would receive the documents and then we would have the study, rather than call witnesses before we've seen any of the documents. If that's the case, and we're talking about documents in the thousands, or in my other committee, tens of thousands, I would caution that that would require a translation service that might prove to be onerous for the purpose of the study. And we need to ensure that the French language is protected at all times within the House of Commons, and bilingualism be protected as a foundation to the country. And my concern is that if we're doing a demand for documents in a very practical way that includes tens of thousands of documents, then it wouldn't be practical. It would be very unlikely that we would get to this study before at least the beginning of like mid 2024. And that's what I'm dealing with at another committee. So I'm wondering if there's any light on exactly what it is we're talking about in terms of the scale of the documents.
Well, frankly, Mr. Green, I just asked the clerk, and there is no way of knowing this, but there are some options that we could explore. We could start by accepting the amendment as proposed by Madame Fortier to have the report. We're going to have the study. We're going to have witnesses that come. So the committee can at any point ask for particular documents to be requested after or either during a witness appearing before the committee. So we have no way of narrowing down, based on the way the motion is right now, the volume, just what the volume of the documents are going to be. So if there's some way that, you know, maybe we start with the report. This is a suggestion as the chair. Maybe we start with the report, and then, of course, as you know, Mr. Green, the committee has the ability and the authority to compel for documents if we require them at a later time. So,
Mr. Chair, again, on a practical notion, I haven't received, or I don't know the full extent of the report. Do you know how many pages it is, and has it already been translated into both official languages? Because we may find it's voluminous. We may find that there's 2 or 3. I don't know how extensive the Grant Thornton audit was. Does anybody in the room know how many pages it was? Because these are practical considerations that would create a tremendous delay and would be pretty cost intensive for us to have to translate.
Yeah, I don't have an answer to that question. And if anybody in this room does have an answer to the question, please help me out here. Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Khalid.
Although I don't know the actual number of pages, I do think it is a more clear or a concise or a clean way for us to start this, as opposed to just putting out a call for a whole bunch of documents that we have no idea about. And I absolutely agree with Mr. Green as to we should have a more of a practical approach to this, and I'm more than happy to start with this report and then kind of see where we land.
Okay. Look, we have...
Just for the record,
sorry,
you still
Mr.
have
Green.
the floor.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Although I will cede the floor to any other members from other parties who want to go on the record and say they agree with me. I'm happy to do that at any time. So I'm looking for my conservative and Bloc friends to do the same. Look, we can move forward with this. I just want to let everybody know where we're headed, because I know Mr. Villamere, I know Francophones around the table, Ms. Fortier and others, who will not allow for us to receive information that is not translated into both official languages. And as a New Democrat, we will continue to fight for those language rights. So at this point, I'm happy to end my time on the intervention and allow my colleagues to intervene.
Okay, so thank you for your intervention, Mr. Green. I'm interested in hearing what Mr. I do have a list, so I've got Mr. Villamere, Mr. Barrett, and then Madame Fortier. Look, we've made some headway here in terms of, we've come to an agreement on at least 2 of the amendments, the majority of the committee. I know I suspect that the emails and all of the documents will be exhaustive. And if there's some way that we can find a way to start with this report, I would strongly consider that, and then use our leverage as a committee to compel for further documents if we need to at some point. This may be a good starting point for us, maybe not. All depends on the committee. Monsieur Villemure.
Les rapports de ce type.
Reports like this one are often quite exhaustive and complete and are not usually over 100 pages long. I think that that's what we should start with, because if we look at emails and all of that, we won't have the capacity to analyze them. And so I think that the report would be sufficient. It was probably made in both official languages, and I'd be happy to start with that. And I would have an amendment to add a little later.
Monsieur Villemure.
Thank you, Monsieur Villemure.
So I just relying on Alexandra here, our analyst. So in a September 25th newspaper or news article, the report was expected to be released publicly in the coming weeks. So we're in the coming weeks. I'm not sure that the report has been released at this point. I suspect, as Alexandra said, that perhaps it's in translation in order to be released publicly. So just to be clear, that report is not available at this point. So at least based on this. Go ahead, Michael, and then Mona. Go ahead, Mike.
So, Chair, should I complete my hat trick and lose 3 votes in a row here?
I'm here.
Thanks, Mr. Seebeck. And to Mr. Green's point, if we request this this report and it's not available because it's not been produced or the translation that's been provided for, I wouldn't see anyone on the committee looking to take steps to order its production when it's in production. But I think that as a starting point, as you said, if the committee then has a request for individual documents that we've identified through witness testimony or through our review of this report, once available in both official languages, then I think that we could further our end of providing some answers for Canadians.
Okay. So what I will do, with the help of the clerk and the analyst, is I will find out when the expected date of this report is to be released publicly. And if we can find out an answer to that, as I stated earlier, we're not going to start this study if the motion is adopted as amended in the next couple of weeks. This article appeared on September 25th, and it said it was going to happen in the coming weeks. So we are in the coming weeks now. So if you can just leave that with us, we'll find out if we can get some information, and then I can relay that to the committee. So if, Michael, you're saying that this is a good starting point and that we can agree to that, I have Mona next.
Non, moi, c'était juste pour dire que c'est important que...
I just wanted to say that it was important that the document be in both official languages, but we did mention that, so it's fine.
Did I say that right? Comprendre? Yeah, okay. Annick would be very proud of me. We understand, nous comprendons justement que c'est important.
We understand that it is important to have it in both official languages. So we're not going to send or share the report in English only.
So on the amendment, I'm sensing that we have agreement on that. I don't need to take a roll, do I? Or what do you want to do? Let's take a roll. Okay. Yeah, go ahead.
Just do it on division.
Go ahead, Madam Clerk, with the roll, please.
All right, so on the third amendment from Ms. Fortier,
Right.
Mr. Baines,
Yes.
Ms. Namoff,
Yes.
Mr. Kellaway,
Yes.
Madame Fortier. Oui. Ms. Khalid. Yes. Mr. Barrett.
Nope.
Monsieur Gourde.
No.
Mr. Seebeck.
No.
Monsieur Villemure. Mr. Green.
Je suis un vote en faveur.
Yeas 7, nays 3.
Okay, so the amendment is passed. So we have a motion as amended. Plusieurs de discussions, Monsieur Villemure, s'il vous plaît.
Monsieur Villemure, you had something to add? Microphone, please. I have an amendment to the motion so that the motion would include an assessment of the level of interference by the minister or potential conflict of interest by the minister in this situation. So, interference and a possible conflict of interest should be included in the motion. Just to clarify, what minister? The minister that will be before us. One moment, please.
Where and how? Je vais expliquer.
Just a question.
Just a question and a suggestion by the clerk.
Worried about where this might go, so Madame Guerrier.
Dans un monde idéal, quand on a des suggestions, des amendements,
When we get suggestions for an amendment, often we're given a sentence or told where we would put that in the motion. Could you clarify where you would want that inserted into the motion? And hear the testimony from the Minister of Innovation in order to assess the possible interference or conflict of interest in the matter. So we'll be receiving the minister for something.
Puis c'est dans le périmètre du comité.
Within the parameters or the scope of the committee.
Okay. Monsieur Villemure a proposé un amendement.
Mr. Villemure has proposed an amendment. Do we have any comments on this amendment? Mr. Barrett.
I support the amendment.
Okay, merci. Any other discussion? I don't see any. So on sur l'amendement de Monsieur Villemure,
On Mr. Villemure's amendment,
nous sommes en.
do we all agree? Can you please repeat it because I misunderstood. Are we talking about the minister? Are we talking about the situation? I just want to be sure that I understand the difference. So we're hearing from the Minister of Innovation in order to assess the possible interference by the minister and the potential conflict of interest by the minister. So, after hearing from the minister, correct? It needs to be included so that we can talk to the minister about this.
Okay.
S'il n'y en a pas, il n'y en a pas. Là, mais,
No.
If there was none, there was none, and it's fine.
So, just hang on a sec, guys. Let's get through this quick if we can. So, can we have agreement on division? Okay. So the amendment carries. Okay. Merci, Monsieur Villemure. Mr. Green, I'm assuming you were good with the amendment? Okay, thank you. All right. So now we're on the main motion as amended. Is there any further discussion on the main motion as amended? Seeing none. Do we have an agreement as a committee on the main motion as amended? Hands up on division again? Okay. Mr. Green, you're good? Okay, thank you. All right. Now, Mr. Green, can I circle back with you to have a discussion about what you brought up earlier? Because I do have some information that's relevant to your concern. So I'd like to do that if we can get together at some point tomorrow. And then we can discuss, obviously I'm at the will of the committee if the committee wants to expand this further, but there was some discussion about the amendments and the motion as it related to the social media study. So I would like to discuss that with you first, and then if we need to, we can bring that back to committee at the next meeting. Correct? Okay. All right. Okay, yeah, and thank you for that. And the clerk is just reminding me again, we work on deadlines here. Ms. Khalid's point about asking TikTok for any further information, any questions that we have. Can we set a firm deadline? I'm going to suggest, what's today, Wednesday, maybe a week from now? If that's, is that too long or too short to have your questions into the clerk so that we can send them to TikTok a week from today?
Chair, I can probably have them in by
Friday?
the end of the week. to
Friday
be
by
honest.
5?
Yeah,
Friday by
I'm
5?
not sure how other members feel about it, but I
Yeah.
mean, I have my questions
Okay,
prepared.
okay, so why don't we look at Friday by 5? That provides a little bit of clarity on your side.
And a deadline for them to answer back?
And do we want a deadline for them to answer back? Ms. Khalid, any suggestions?
A week would be fantastic.
A week?
I mean, we do want to be able to write the
Yeah.
reports based on the answers.
Okay, so, so our deadline for proposing questions would be Friday at 5. Their deadline for responding to questions will be the following week at 5 o'clock, okay?
1 week after I
Yeah.
send the questions, right?
Now, we do have a study budget that should be adopted today. Do you have the budget handy? Just bear with me. I don't see it in my notes here, so,
It's here.
okay. Just bear with us. I don't expect that this is going to be a problem, but I just want to make sure that we have the approval of the committee on the budget.
Is it?
Okay,
No, sorry.
$3 million. That was amazing.
Social media.
Only kidding.
There we go.
Okay. All right. So we do have a study budget that is in the amount of $22,250. Can I seek approval from the committee to approve the budget? I see Mike's got a thumbs up. Are we good on this side? 22,500. Matt, René, en accord? Wait, okay. So the study budget has been approved. I want to thank everyone for today. We started what I thought was a really good study. I want to thank the clerks and the analysts for all their preparatory work on this. We'll continue next week, and then thank the technicians as well. Have a great week, everyone. We'll see you on Monday. Meeting adjourned.